Okay, friends. Today what we're going to do is we're going to do a little practice on inferencing. So I'm going to read you a little riddle. And I want you to listen real closely and see if you can figure out what I'm talking about. Here's my first one. You have to listen to all the clues. The birds fly south for me. I come after autumn and before spring. I'm a season when days are short, nights are long, it's cold outside, people ski and build snowmen.
One more time.
I'll read it one more time. Birds fly south, I come after autumn and before spring. I'm a season when days are short and nights are long, it's cold outside, people ski and build snowmen.
Jelly time. Because it's before spring and you can see the sand from the hills.
Aku.
Jelly time.
Somebody share.
Come, get up.
Jasmine, what did you say?
So I thought it was winter because
Aku. Get up.
before spring and people like
Stand
to
up.
like ski down hills in snow and like to build snowmen.
Did anybody agree? Did anyone say the same thing? Awesome. All right. So, what you just did is you took the clues that I gave you and what you already know to make a guess or to make an inference about what I'm talking about. So, let's try one more. Okay? Just listen. You can plant me. You can pick me. I grow on a stalk. You can eat me on the cob or eat flakes of me for breakfast. And you can pop me. This time, when you're telling your partner your inference, I want you to use one of our inference stems to answer.
Jelly time.
You first. You first, Aku. You first. Oh.
Peanut butter.
Jelly time.
Who would like to share their inference?
I think it was corn because it said you could plant me and you could like shred it into pieces.
Lucas?
I think corn because I know it goes on stalks and it can also have cornflakes.
Very good. So somebody raise your hand and remind the class, what is an inference? There's two things that we're combining to make an inference. What are those two things? Cooper?
Schema,
Oh, I love that you said schema. Cooper, what is schema?
what you already know.
So you take what you already know, and somebody tell me what else do you use? You take your schema, your background knowledge, what you already know, plus what, Yasmin?
The clues from the book.
The clues from the text. And once you take those clues and what you know, you can make an inference. So when we're reading a book, does the author always give us all the information?
No.
No, we have to infer sometimes. We have to make inferences based on what we read. So today, we are going to read one of my favorite stories called Enemy Pie.
Come over here.
In this story, the word enemy is very important. What does this word mean to you? Turn to a neighbor and tell them what the word enemy means to you.
enemy pie means like
You're not talking your best words. Yeah, like it means like someone
Or they want to destroy each other. Or there's a bad guy and a good guy that wants to fight each other. Those are like enemies. Or a good guy wants to.
Okay, I need your attention in 5, 4,
3, 2, 1.
Go.
Who would like to share what you and your partner do? What is the word, when you think of the word enemy, what do you think of? Lucas?
When I think of enemy, I think of someone like a good and bad team, and they really don't like each other a little bit, like the enemies.
Okay, so you think of like a team battling against each other. Good. Zoe, what do you think of?
When I think of enemy, I think of like bad, like this.
Something bad? Hannah, what do you think of?
I think it's a person that you hate.
Yes.
For some reason, every time I hear enemy, I feel I think of like bad versus good.
So we're going to read Enemy Pie, and while we're reading, we're going to really think a lot about our character, and we're going to have to do some inferencing, because the author's not really going to tell us what the character's thinking or feeling, and so we're going to have to take those clues from the text and what we know about enemies and how we would feel, and we're going to make some inferences. So, Enemy Pie. It should have been a perfect summer. My dad helped me build a new treehouse in our backyard. My sister was at camp for 3 whole weeks, and I was on the best baseball team in town. It should have been a perfect summer, but it wasn't. It was good until Jeremy Ross moved into the neighborhood, right next door to my best friend Stanley. I did not like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me when he struck out of the baseball game. He had a party on his trampoline, and I wasn't even invited. But my best friend Stanley was. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I never even had an enemy list until he moved into the neighborhood. But as soon as he came along, I needed one. I hung it up on my treehouse where Jeremy Ross was not allowed to go. Dad understood stuff like enemies. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies too, but he knew of a good way to get rid of them. I asked him to tell me how. Tell you how? I'll show you how, he said. He pulled a really old recipe book off the kitchen shelf. Inside, there was a worn-out scrap of paper with faded writing. Dad held it up and squinted at it. Enemy Pie, he said, satisfied. When the boy's dad held up the recipe for enemy pie, what do you think the boy was thinking? Let's make an inference. The author doesn't tell us what he's thinking, but what do you think he's thinking when he holds up that recipe? Jasmine, what do you think?
I think he's like, ooh, what can enemy pie do? I wonder what's gonna happen to him. Is he like gonna be mean to me? Is he gonna like it? Is he gonna throw up? Like, I wonder what he's thinking.
Yeah, he's probably pretty curious. Oh, I like that. Yes, another agrees. Cooper, what do you think? What do you
I
infer?
think he's like, this could be my only chance to get rid of my enemy.
Very good. All right, the next person I call, I want you to use an inference thinking step to tell me what you think this boy is thinking. Lucas?
Maybe that it could be like he wonders if there's gonna be some girls that he would die from it.
Why do you think that?
Because I know that, or like that's interesting. I want to make an analysis of what I can get rid of them immediately.
Because you might be that. You would probably be the same way, wouldn't you?
I infer that it might have bad stuff in the pie. What's the name?
That's good inference. Noah?
Can you see what the bad thing did just again?
We're talking about the kid. What do you think the kid's thinking?
I think the kid's thinking he might that. I think he's literally thinking, this pie is gonna be so bad. He's gonna wish he was never in this neighborhood or that he never messed with me. This pie's gonna. I bet my dad dealt with enemies, so he knows what to do to fix it.
We'll do some more in just a minute. You may be wondering what exactly is in enemy pie. I was wondering too. But Dad said the recipe was so secret, he couldn't even tell me. I decided it must be magic. I begged him to tell me something, anything. I will tell you this, he said. Enemy pie is the fastest known way to get rid of enemies. Now, of course, this got my mind working. What kinds of things? Disgusting things. Disgusting things would I put in a pie for an enemy? I brought Dad some weeds from the garden, but he just shook his head. I brought him some earthworms and rocks, but he didn't think he'd need those. I gave him the gum I'd been chewing on all morning. He gave it right back. I went outside to play alone. I shot baskets until the ball got stuck on the roof. I threw a boomerang that never came back to me, and all the while I listened to the sounds of my dad chopping and stirring and blending the ingredients of enemy pie. This could be a great summer after all. Enemy pie was going to be awful. I tried to imagine how horrible it just must smell, or worse, what it would look like. But when I was in the backyard looking for ladybugs, I smelled something really, really, really good. And as far as I could tell, it was coming from our kitchen. I was a little bit confused. I went in to ask Dad what was wrong. Enemy pie shouldn't smell this good. But Dad was smart. If enemy pie smelled bad, your enemy would never want to eat it, he said. I could tell he'd made enemy pie before. The buzzer rang and Dad put on his oven mitts and pulled out the pie of the oven. It looked like plain old pie. It was good enough to eat. I was catching on. But still, I wasn't really sure how this enemy pie worked. What exactly did it do to enemies? Maybe it made their hair fall out or their breath stinky. Maybe it made bullies cry. I asked Dad, but he was no help. He wouldn't tell me a thing. But while the pie cooled, he filled me in on my job. He talked quietly. There is one part of enemy pie that I can't do. In order for it to work, you must spend a day with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to him. It's not easy, but that's the only way that enemy pie can work. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Of course I was. It sounded horrible, it was scary, but it was worth a try. All I had to do was spend one day with Jeremy Ross, and he'd be out of my hair for the rest of my life. I rode my bike to his house and knocked on the door. How do you think the boy felt to have to spend the entire day with his enemy? Think about how you would feel. Let's make an inference. So when you answer, I want you to pick one of your inferring steps. How do you think the boy felt to spend the entire day with his enemy? Addie.
Maybe he was a little bit nervous
Why do you think he would be nervous?
because he doesn't like his enemy.
So he might not be sure what's going to happen. That's a good inference. Courtney, what do you think?
I infer that he's like oh, I don't want to go over there tonight and slap Daddy and stuff because they're enemies and but he doesn't want to go towards the child because I want to get rid of him.
Have you ever felt that way? I know sometimes when I'm like with my brother and he's bothering me or he's being mean to me, my mom will come up and tell me, she'll say, you're the older one, you need to be nice. And sometimes, isn't that the hardest thing to do, to be nice to someone who's not being nice to you?
No.
Raise your hand if you've ever felt that way, if it's hard to be nice to someone that's not nice to you. Yeah. So can you guys kind of understand maybe where he's coming from? How would you feel, or how do you think he's feeling because you've done that too? Noah?
I think that he also kind of might feel like, hey, maybe if I get to know him, he might not be such a bad guy.
You think so? Yeah? Cooper?
He might be thinking like, oh man, because
Yeah.
he has to see the day with his enemy.
Darn it, because you probably feel the same way too if you had spent the whole day with an enemy, right?
Maybe
Be like,
think he
ugh,
wanted to rethink
Maybe
that.
dreading it a little bit. Yeah. When Jeremy opened the door, he seemed surprised. He stood on the other side of the door and looked at me, waiting for me to say something. I was nervous. Can you play? I asked. He looked confused. I'll go ask my mom, he said. He came back with his shoes in his hand. His mom walked around the corner to say hello. You boys stay out of trouble, she said, smiling. So let's think about this other boy. Let's infer how he was feeling. I want you to tell me, why was Jeremy confused when the boy asked him to play? Why was he so confused? Leo?
Because I think the other boy was his enemy.
And so why is he confused?
Because now he wants to be his friend.
Yeah, he's probably wondering, why are you here? If you consider me your enemy, why are you here? Do you agree, Courtney? Lucas?
I think that Jeremy never knew he was there, so he did not and thought he was just a stranger.
Maybe he was a stranger. Jasmine?
He, like at the beginning of the book, he said that Jeremy, he laughed at him and for his pitch. So he's like, and I think Jeremy knows that he's his enemy, but he's like, why would he want to do that? I know he's my enemy. Why would he want to come over and play with me?
Yeah, I agree. Jasmine, did you say that? You agree? Sahana?
I think that since, because I think he was confused because they, for
actually think Jeremy laughed for some weird reason. It was just a coincidence, and that he was actually a nice kid, and he didn't think, and he didn't know that he was his enemy. So he thought maybe I could get to know this kid and think it would be fun.
Yeah, that's a good
I'm gonna
input.
scan you.
We rode bikes for a while and played on the trampoline. Then we made some water balloons and threw them at the neighborhood girls, but we missed. Jeremy's mom made us lunch. After lunch, we went over to my home. It was strange, but I was kind of having fun with my enemy. He almost seemed nice, but of course I couldn't tell Dad that since he had worked so hard on his enemy pie. Jeremy Ross liked my basketball hoop. He said he wished he had a basketball hoop, but he didn't have room for one. I let him win a game, just to be nice. Jeremy Ross knew how to throw a boomerang. He threw it and it came right back. I threw it and went over the house and into the backyard. When we climbed over the fence to find it, the first thing Jeremy noticed was my treehouse. My treehouse was my treehouse. I was the boss. If my sister wanted in, I didn't have to let her. If my dad wanted in, I didn't have to let him. And if Jeremy wanted in, can we go in? He asked. I knew he was going to ask me that. But he was the top person, the only person on my enemy list. And enemies aren't allowed in my treehouse. But he did teach me how to throw a boomerang, and he did have me over for lunch, and he did let me play on his trampoline. He wasn't being a very good enemy. Okay, I said, but hold on. I climbed up ahead of him and tore the enemy list off the wall. I had a checkerboard and some cards in the treehouse, and we played games until my dad called us down for dinner. We pretended we didn't hear him, and when he came to get us, we tried to hide from him. But somehow, he found us. Dad made us macaroni and cheese for dinner, my favorite. It was Jeremy's favorite, too. Maybe Jeremy Ross wasn't so bad after all. I was beginning to think that maybe we should just forget about the enemy pie. But sure enough, after dinner, Dad brought out the pie. I watched as he cut the pie into 8 thick slices. Dad, I said, it is sure nice having a new friend in the neighborhood. I was trying to get his attention and trying to tell him that Jeremy Ross was no longer my enemy. But Dad only smiled and nodded. I think he thought I was just pretending. Dad dished up 3 plates side by side, the big pieces of pie and giant scoops of ice cream. He passed one to me and one to Jeremy. Wow, Jeremy said, looking at the pie. My dad never makes pie like this. It was at this point that I panicked. I didn't want Jeremy to eat the enemy pie. He was my friend, and I couldn't let him eat it. Jeremy is about to eat the pie. How do you think the boy is feeling now? Why is he feeling the same? Raise your hand. So he's about to eat it. How is our main character feeling? Let's make an inference. Akira, what's your inference?
I bet he's kind of feeling like nervous, like really nervous, because like now Jeremy is his friend, so he's getting really cautious about him eating it, because he thinks like he might like throw up or like lose his teeth or something, so he's really scared about that.
That's a good inference. And that was a good word choice. He's probably feeling a little cautious because now he's his friend and he doesn't want to see him get hurt. Cooper, what's your inference?
I think he's thinking like, no.
Yeah, Lucas?
I think he's trying to stop him.
So how is he feeling?
I think he's feeling that he feels scared that he still wants to eat. He doesn't want to eat a pie, or then he might still lose a friend.
Jeremy, don't eat it. It's bad pie. I think it's poisonous or something. Jeremy's fork stopped before reaching his mouth. He crumpled up his eyebrows and looked at me. I felt relieved. I had saved his life. I was a hero. If it's so bad, Jeremy asked, then why has your dad already eaten half of it? I turned to look at my dad. Sure enough, he was eating enemy pie. Good stuff, he mumbled through a mouthful. That was all he said. I sat down there watching them eat enemy pie for a few seconds. Dad was laughing. Jeremy was happily eating. And neither of them was losing their hair. It seemed enough, so I took a tiny taste. Enemy pie was delicious. After dessert, Jeremy rode his bike home, but not before inviting me over to play on his trampoline in the morning. He said he'd teach me how to flip. As for enemy pie, I still don't know how to make it. I still wonder if enemies really do hate it, or if their hair falls out, or breath turns bad. But I don't know if I'll ever get an answer, because I just lost my best enemy. So how do you think the boy is feeling at the end of the story? So what was happening?
Enemy pie every second.
I
think Joey wants us to have played I think Journey one has to eat pie. He said has to eat and then
I know what the enemy is.
it's not funny.
I'm serious.
So, I think
peanut butter
jelly.
Who would like to share with us what was your inference? What did you infer based on the clues from the text and based on your schema, which you know and how you would feel? What do you infer he was feeling at the end? Absolutely. Courtney?
I can conclude that at the beginning, since he and then after
So what was his dad's plan the whole time? What was up with the enemy pirates' plan, Lucas?
making friends.
To make them friends. Was there anything really special about the enemy pie paper? Was it really an enemy pie?
No, it was more of a friend pie.
Do you think there was any special ingredients, or do you think it was just a normal pie?
Just a normal pie.
Anybody agree? Anybody think it was just a normal
Yeah.
pie?
Yeah.
Yes, so.
As it was a normal pie, just like Cooper said, it could have, if they're enemies, the pie might have actually made Jeremy Ross actually like oh, your dad's pie, great.
Okay, before you go back to your seats, I want you to turn to your partner and tell them what two parts make an inference. Once you have told each other the two parts of an inference, you may go back to your seats.
Schema and clues. Bye. Bye. Bye.